Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here today at Harvard, and welcome to all of those watching on Facebook. My name is Paul Andrew. I'm the Vice President for Public Affairs and Communications, and my role today is merely to get everyone settled in advance of our speakers. You'll hear brief remarks from two speakers today, and then we'll open the press conference up to questions. Just some logistical points. Please await the pass microphone before asking your question. This will allow those in the room and watching on Facebook to hear your question. Please state your name and immediate outlet you're representing. And if the press conference is still ongoing at a few minutes before 4, I will call for the last question. Thank you again for joining us. It's now my pleasure to introduce William F. Lee, Senior Fellow of the Harvard Corporation and Chair of Harvard's Presidential Search Committee.
Let me get this quite right. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Welcome, everyone. I have the great honor and privilege of introducing you in a few moments to the 29th President of Harvard University, Larry Bacow. Larry is an extraordinarily accomplished, admired, and forward-looking university leader, a respected scholar and a respected educator, and a truly wonderful human being. Harvard's future will be in excellent hands. Let me say just a few words about our search and our new president-elect. We began our search last summer when Drew Faust announced her plans to step down this coming June. Now, we take every opportunity we can to thank Drew and to recognize Drew for her extraordinary service and her extraordinary leadership. She has been a visionary leader. She has been a leader of the values and the culture that represent Harvard's best. We have been blessed to have her as our president for the last 11 years, and I want to begin today by taking a minute to thank her once again for all that she has done. Throughout the summer and fall, our search committee reached out widely across Harvard, to faculty, to students, to staff, and alumni. We also sought advice from dozens of higher education leaders and others outside of Harvard with perspectives on the university and its future. We are grateful to all the members of the community who have shared their aspirations, their concerns, their criticisms, their advice, and their counsel. We are especially thankful to the members of 3 advisory committees composed of faculty, students, and staff who worked endlessly and tirelessly to increase the channels of input of information to us and to give us their own good counsel. We did our very best to be good listeners, and our wide consultations sharpened our view of the qualities most important in the next Harvard president. Those discussions highlighted the importance of seeking someone who has a broad and deep experience with the many, many challenging issues confronting universities today. Someone who clearly sees the huge opportunities before us in education, in research, and in serving the world broadly. But someone who also clearly sees and is ready to confront the great challenges facing us at a moment when the value of higher education is being questioned, at a moment when the fundamental truth of fact-based inquiry is being questioned and called into doubt. And we wanted someone who could hit the ground running, because neither we nor higher education have time to spare. More than 700 individuals were suggested to us as possible nominees for consideration. We spent many hours learning as much as we could about the leading nominees. The input of the Faculty Advisory Committee, chaired by Robin Kelsey, was particularly important as we reviewed the many different possible candidates. As things progressed, one of our own search committee members was repeatedly suggested by people inside and outside of Harvard. During our consultations, his name was suggested by leaders of other academic institutions, by our own faculty, by our own staff, and by faculty at other leading academic institutions. By late last year, it seemed to us that we should at least ask him whether he would consider becoming a candidate. And eventually we asked. He thought it over, he talked to his wife, and he came back and said he would. He said he would, and he said he would be interested because he viewed this moment in time as critical for higher education in general and for Harvard in particular. He said he would because he wanted to do everything he could to advance and affirm the vital work of universities. He said he would and he could because that had been the focus of his entire professional life. And so last December, with no public fanfare, actually no public announcement at all, Larry Bacow stepped off the search committee and became a candidate. He went through the same process as our other candidates, but in the end, he emerged as the person that we unanimously and enthusiastically believed was the best choice to lead Harvard forward. He is one of the most respected, insightful, experienced, and effective leaders in American higher education. He is someone other leaders across higher education look to for advice on leadership and solving hard problems. He is someone that Drew has looked to for years on advice on solving hard problems. He knows universities like few others, and he knows Harvard. I will not try to review his entire resume of accomplishments. It would be too long, and it would run past 4 o'clock. But because Larry is not the sort of person who will talk about himself, let me give you the short version. He grew up in Pontiac, Michigan, dreaming of going to college at a place called MIT, and he did. But he later came to Harvard to study for 3 graduate degrees, including a PhD in public policy and a JD at Harvard Law School. He then served for 24 years on the MIT faculty, weaving together his interests in environmental policy, economics, and the law. He held a named professorship in environmental studies. He was the chair of the MIT faculty. And he then served as the Institute's chancellor with a wide span of responsibility for education and research initiatives across the university. Given his success in these multiple roles, it was no surprise that in 2001, he was asked to become the president of Tufts, where he served with great distinction for more than a decade. He worked hard and tirelessly to build the university's strengths on so many fronts: its faculty, its staff, its students, its academic leadership, its standing among universities, and its capacity to serve the world. He was a champion of opportunity and robust financial aid. He helped knit together Tufts' 8 different schools. He made public service and engagement a priority. He embraced diversity as a cornerstone of excellence. He encouraged innovation in teaching and investment research. He worked to improve relations with the university's host communities and with its main teaching hospitals. He steered Tufts through the Great Recession and successfully led its largest campaign ever. And at his last Tufts commencement, when Chuck Vest, then the President Emeritus of MIT, spoke, President Emeritus Vest said, and I quote, that Larry was, quote, perhaps the most respected university president in the country. Since then, Larry has made Harvard his professional home, first at our Graduate School of Education, more recently at the Kennedy School, and for 6+ years as an invaluable member of our principal governing board, the corporation. He has been an advisor and mentor to many students, to many faculty, to deans, and to presidents. He has written and spoken incisively on some of the hardest challenges confronting higher education today. And he's become intimately familiar with Harvard and the strategic imperatives critical to the university's future. But beyond his remarkable resume, and you'll all learn more about it as time progresses, he is simply a wonderful person. He inspires trust. He is not just smart, but wise. He is innovative and entrepreneurial. He has high academic standards and excellent judgment in people. He has a strong moral compass and extraordinary emotional intelligence. He relates easily to all different kinds of people and motivates them to commit to something larger than just themselves. He is deeply curious, intellectually curious, highly interdisciplinary, and naturally collaborative. He has the confidence to set a set of priorities and to make the hard choices to implement them. He is a person whose natural instinct is to give credit, but not to take it. And as a result, he is all about the institution and the people in the institution, and not about himself. He is someone who loves Harvard, but whose love isn't blind, and who's always asking how Harvard can do better, not just for Harvard, but for the broader world. And he is a loving husband and father, deeply devoted to his family, who are with us today. He and his wife Adele met on his first day at Harvard Law School many years ago. I consider it Harvard's great good fortune that Larry answered our question, yes, he would be willing to be considered and willing to serve. The search committee considers it Harvard's great fortune that during the pivotal years ahead, a stretch which will challenge higher education in Harvard, we have the leader that we think will carry us through successfully, robustly, and representing all the values that Harvard has stood for over the many years. It is my privilege now to introduce to you the soon-to-be 29th president of Harvard University, Larry Bacow.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please, thank you. It's very touching. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Bill, and thanks to all of you for being here. I'm truly honored and humbled by this opportunity to succeed my good friend and colleague and somebody who I admire greatly, Drew Faust, and also to have the chance to follow in the footsteps of some wonderful leaders that Harvard has enjoyed. Neil, it's an honor to have you here today. This is truly a remarkable institution. I must confess that when I arrived at the Kennedy School in 1972, as a 20-year-old graduate student, I never could have imagined that I would be standing here today. Like generations of students who've come to this campus, I was in awe of this place. And I have to admit that I wondered if the admissions committee had made a mistake, if I was meant to be here, if I was worthy, if I would fit in. It's sort of what Harvard does to everybody. But as it's done so for so many of us, Harvard made me better. It was here I learned that I was a teacher at heart. It was here that I discovered that I wanted to devote my life to scholarship. It was here that I nurtured my passion for higher education. And it was here that I discovered who I really was. Now I'm grateful for the opportunity to give back to an institution that helped to make me the person that I am today. I know of no place on earth with greater potential to help change people's lives for the better. And I can think of no more exciting time than doing all I can, and indeed I would say all we can, to help Harvard achieve that potential. Not just for the good of our students, but for the good of the world that we aim to serve. I grew up in Pontiac, Michigan. Both of my parents were immigrants, refugees from Europe. My father was born in Minsk. His family brought him here to this country as a child to escape the pogroms of Eastern Europe. My mother arrived on the second Liberty ship that brought refugees from Europe after the war. She survived Auschwitz, the only member of her family to do so, and in fact the only Jew from her town who survived the war as well. When she arrived on our shores, she was all of 19. When I reflect upon my parents' journey to this country, I realize how lucky I am. Where else can one go in one generation from off the boat with literally nothing to enjoy the kind of life and opportunity that I and my family have been fortunate to enjoy? It was higher education that made this all possible. And I look forward to working every day as president of Harvard to ensure that future generations benefit from the same opportunity that my family had. And so many of us, I suspect, who sit in this room today also had. And that is the opportunity to experience the American dream. The Harvard that I have known has always stood for at least three things: the pursuit of truth, or as we like to say, veritas, a commitment, an unwavering commitment to excellence, but also to opportunity. In a nation divided, these guiding ideals have never been more important. We should never shy away from, nor be apologetic about our commitment, affirming our commitment to make the world a better place through our teaching, through our scholarship, but also to our commitment to a search for truth, a commitment to excellence, as well as a commitment to opportunity for all. And we should also recognize that all of our progress towards realizing these ideals over decades, even centuries at a place like Harvard, that there is still much we can do, much we can learn, and more that we can contribute to making the world better together. As Bill noted, these are challenging times for higher education in America. I often say that one of the things that makes being a university president tough, I'm looking at Drew and Neil as I say this, is that everybody who went to college thinks they can run one. These days, higher education has plenty of critics. And candidly, I think some of the criticism is fair. We need to do a better job of controlling our costs. We need to do a better job of operating more efficiently. We need to collaborate with others, with our peer institutions, with industry, and the broader world. And we need to be vigilant to ensure that our campuses are always open to new ideas, that they are places where our members feel free to express themselves, and also where every member of this community feels that he or she belongs. While the challenges confronting us are great, I think the opportunities are even greater, and I'm excited by that. We are blessed with extraordinary students and faculty and staff. In fact, every time I walk through the yard and I see flocks of tourists there taking pictures of the statue of John Harvard, of Mass Hall, of University Hall, I always want to stop them and say, no, 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 that's not Harvard. Harvard is its people. That's what makes this place specialty. Extraordinary faculty who are doing work in every possible intellectual domain possible. Students who inspire us all the time. And staff who really enable all of us to do their work. It's an amazing collection of people that I now feel privileged to lead. I'm particularly excited by the extension of our campus that's taking shape in Alston. Alston gives us opportunities to forge new partnerships across Harvard's many parts, both intellectually and otherwise, between Harvard and our neighbors, between Harvard and our sister institutions, between Harvard and the rest of the world. And it also gives us the opportunity, not just in Alston, but across all of Harvard, to envision the university of the future and to bring that future to life. Very exciting indeed. One of the things that has always drawn so many of us to Harvard is how it aspires to excel across a wide range of academic domains. You only have to name our schools to get the idea. Arts and sciences, and business, and design, divinity, education, engineering, government, law, medicine, dental medicine, public health, and of course, thanks to Drew, the Radcliffe Institute, which now spans the entire endeavor. Our breadth has long been our great strength, and our great opportunity now is the chance to combine our strengths in new ways that help address some of the world's most pressing problems. When our faculty and students and staff think of Harvard, I want them to think, this is the place where I can do my best work. This is the place where I can pursue opportunities beyond those that might be available to me anywhere else. This is the place that whatever my background, wherever I came from, whatever I look like, whatever my academic focus, whatever my point of view, that I can have the greatest chance not only to succeed personally, but even more importantly, to make a difference in the lives of others. I'm enormously excited to be part of such an adventure, and for these next several months, I also look forward to being a Harvard student again. I still have much to learn, and I know from my prior life here that there is no better place to learn than at Harvard. Those of us privileged to lead this university are invested with a precious trust. Working together, faculty, staff, students, and the governing boards, I promise to do everything within my power to prove myself worthy of that trust. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, questions, and I hope the first one is from the Crimson. Excellent.
This is working. My name is Christine Guillaume, and I'm a reporter for the Harvard Crimson. I want to ask, what is your top priority for Harvard when you take office?
So we learned a lot during the search process. And we spent a lot of time listening to students and faculty and staff. Oops. And I'm going to draw upon what we've learned in that process. But I also know from my prior experience, as I just said, I still have a lot to learn. And I'm interested in listening to what others have to say about what can be better and how we can make this place better together. So I'll have more to say about that. I'm not trying to dodge your question, but I think it's premature at this point for anybody to come in. Plus, we also have a great president who's still president until June 30th. I look forward to building on her successes and what her predecessors have done as well. Stay tuned. There'll be more. Other questions?
From the Harvard Gazette. Could you describe the moment when you began to seriously consider that you might be a candidate for this position?
That's a really good question. A number of times as a member of the committee, I went out to interview people, as we all did, and some of them said, well, what about you, Larry? And I said, no, thank you. I was there to get their ideas about others to lead Harvard. And then there came a point in which Bill Lee, the senior fellow, turned to me. And maybe you should describe what happened next, Bill, because you were really at the center of that.
The answer is that we had heard from a number of the folks during the interviews that suggesting that we consider Larry. And then several members of the faculty contacted me directly and suggested, what about Larry? And I was in a car on my way home from the airport, and I thought to myself, it would be irresponsible not to ask him, what about Larry? So I called him and said, what about you? And we had a good discussion, and he decided to think about it. And at least from my perspective, that was the moment.
Thanks. And Adele and I then went on a 2-day road trip and spent a lot of time talking and thinking. And you know, I really see this as an opportunity not just to serve Harvard, but at this particular moment in time to serve higher education. As I said, these are tough times. And it's the first time in my lifetime when people have questioned the value of going to college, have questioned whether or not it's a worthy investment for students and their families, have questioned whether or not colleges and universities are worthy of our support. As I just said, I wouldn't be standing before you but for higher education. And so I see this as an opportunity to serve to serve an institution that's made an enormous difference in my life and in so many other people's lives, but also as an opportunity to serve higher education and in the process, I hope, serve the nation.
Hi, I'm Jamie Halper. I'm also from the Crimson. And I'm curious, you have many things that you've done before this. Are there any specific parts of your previous experience you think uniquely prepare you for this position?
Well, I think that everything which we do in life prepares yourself for where you wind up at some level or another. This is still a little bit of an out-of-body experience to be standing in front of you. Nobody springs from the womb ever expecting to be president of Harvard University. But I think I've been, very, very fortunate because I've spent my entire adult life within 2 stops of the red line of where we are standing today. And I've had the benefit of working at some truly wonderful and remarkable institutions, each excellent in their own way. And I would like to think that I've learned from each of those experiences. And I've certainly learned a lot in the 6.5 years that I've served on the corporation. But as I said before, I still have a lot to learn. And I'm counting on some of you guys to teach me that as well. There's a wonderful passage from the Talmud, a sacred text in the Jewish tradition, which are the reflections of a scholar who said, I've learned much from my teachers, more from my colleagues, but most from my students. So I'm expecting students to teach me a lot about Harvard as well.
Hi, I'm Laura Kranz from the Boston Globe. One of the big topics that Harvard's been talking about over the past couple of years is student social life and single-gender organizations. I know you went to MIT and you were in a fraternity and you've talked about the positive influence that was in your life. Can you talk about your views on such kind of social organizations and what you want to see as far as the future of student social life at Harvard?
Right. So, I was in a fraternity. I did have a good experience, but I would note that those were very different times. When I enrolled at MIT, there were 1,000 students in my class, and I think about 5% of them were women. So there was no such thing as gender-neutral housing at MIT. And fortunately, MIT has changed and Harvard has changed. And I think as we look forward, part of what we're trying to do is to ensure that every student who comes to Harvard has an experience which is welcoming, has an experience which makes them feel like a part of this community. So, I think that President Faust and her team have put together a policy which we've had a chance to spend some time thinking about. And we'll have more time to think about going forward. There's an implementation committee, but I think it's the right one for Harvard as we stand here today. And I look forward to working with others to make this a reality.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the role you think universities can play in sort of the national political environment. You talk about doubting the value of higher education. How can a university, including Harvard, address that?
I think we need to engage much more broadly with the world that we live in. I grew up in Pontiac, Michigan, as I mentioned. When I grew up there were 3 General Motors plants in Pontiac. You could graduate from Pontiac Central or Pontiac Northern High School on a Friday and go to work in one of those GM plants and be pretty much guaranteed a comfortable middle-class existence. With benefits, with a pension, you'd send your kids to a good school. Eventually, you'd pay off your mortgage and maybe even buy a little place on a lake. That's all gone. Pontiac has half the population that it did when I graduated. I think academic institutions, including Harvard, need to pay more attention to those in this country who've been left behind in this economy. And I think there are ways that we can make contributions there by focusing our efforts in trying to create opportunity and thinking about economic development. That's one way. I also think that there are other ways that we can contribute. If you take a look at some of the great challenges that the world faces, the big debates in the world, let's take the debate of fundamentalism versus modernity that's tearing the world apart. And I'm not just talking about what's going on in the Middle East. You know, we see it in the United States as well, between Christian fundamentalism and others. We see it in Israel. Adele and I just visited recently, Jewish fundamentalism. This is an issue which is going to be, I think, informed in due time by humanists, by philosophers. We have something to contribute there. I spent most of my career worrying about problems of the environment, environmental policy, climate change. The science of climate change is settled. The debate over climate change is a debate about, largely, I think, about what are the responsibilities of one generation to another. That's not going to be informed by better science. Better science will help. But in the end, it's a question of values and judgment and moral philosophy and ethics. I think we have something to contribute there, too. And I think Harvard has something uniquely which it can contribute, in part because of the breadth of this institution. You know, in sciences, the social sciences, the humanities, medicine, engineering, public health, I could go on. That excites me. Okay. I picked somebody else, but we'll go there afterwards. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
We'll get to you.
Okay. During the search, a lot of people called for a person of color as Harvard's next president. How do you respond to this, and what is your plan for addressing diversity at the university?
So during my time at both Tufts and at MIT, I worked very, very hard to promote excellence. And I think diversity is a pathway to excellence. There's no way that you can recruit the best people, support the best people, if you're only sampling from a small part of the distribution of talent. So, you know, we need to look for the very best. And during my time at Tufts, I'm proud of the record of, you know, bringing women and minorities, people of color, underrepresented groups into the senior leadership, into the faculty, and also into the student body. And I hope to do the same thing here. Now we're getting over here. Sorry.
Antonio Planos, Boston Herald. I don't want to make any assumptions. I'm assuming the university will continue to protect DACA students. If so, how?
Look, you just heard my story. You know, I would not be standing before you today, literally, if this country had turned its back on my parents, who are both refugees. And I think we have to do everything we can to try and protect and support those students who are here, who have known no other country, who are talented. I think Drew has demonstrated extraordinary leadership in this effort, and I look forward to also being a strong voice on behalf of them.
Kirk Tarapeza here with WGBH. You mentioned your commitment to being an advocate for higher education nationally. I mean, being the president of Harvard is a full-time job. How do you plan to balance those two roles, especially considering the amount of machinery that surrounds the office? Do you plan to make yourself more accessible to the public and to the media?
Well, what Bill didn't tell you is I have a twin brother that you haven't met. Look, time is our scarcest resource. There are 24 hours in a day. Another thing that makes this job interesting is on any given day, you never know what your day really is going to be like because it can be overwhelmed by events. And so one is constantly prioritizing. And, you know, there's the tug of trying to devote the time that's necessary to be responsive to all of the internal constituencies that need to be addressed. But there are also the public elements of the job as well. I understand that, and I'm going to do my best to try and, you know, walk that line appropriately. There'll be times in which, by necessity, I'll have to focus internally, times externally. You can't succeed without doing both. It's like asking which blade of the scissors does the cutting. We have one more question in the back.
Hi, Deirdre Fernandez with the Boston Globe. There's been some concern that Harvard has been slightly left behind on issues of STEM and research and sciences and has given way to universities like Stanford. How would you plan to address that, and what do you think needs to be done about it?
Well, I would argue respectfully with the premise. Okay, I think the sciences at Harvard are second to none. There are many institutions that have great science departments. We are among the world leaders in the life sciences. Again, under Drew's leadership, there have been important advances, creating the engineering school as a school, the commitment to Alston for the science and engineering complex, efforts to bring engineering and the life sciences together. I'm excited by the opportunity, and I look forward to supporting those initiatives. I'm not a scientist myself, but I'm a science junkie. It's the reason I went to MIT as an undergraduate, and I'm sorry, but never considered applying to Harvard. But I've worked closely in my prior life with scientists, with engineers, with mathematicians, with physicians, and I look forward to doing it here as well. So I think we're about done. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for the warm reception. To my Harvard colleagues in the room, again, I really am excited and look forward to the opportunity to work with you. And to the media also, thanks for your interest, and I look forward to what I hope will be a long and productive relationship together. Thank you.